Hello, everyone. We are now live. Uh, yeah, I, yes, I want to welcome everyone to our Foreman birthday parties this year. It's the first time for me doing this online, so I hope everything works well. I'm prepared. I only have to press buttons, but let's see where I fail. So, what do we have prepared? We have six sessions. So, oh yes, the green screen is taking the head. Yeah. So we have six sessions. During these sessions, you will always see the chat. So when I'm talking, we will see the general chat, and during the talks, we will have a channel prepared for every session, so you can directly address your questions. I will post the channel always in advance for the session. The second thing we have is Work Adventure. It is meant for the social event, but feel free to join already now. So some people will hang out already there. Yeah, this is what we have prepared. I will take you through the event. For the lineup and the links for the chat and work adventure, have a look at the community thread. There is everything included. So we will have first Manisha talking about Foreman ACD. Then Matthias, who will talk about Pulp 3. Pulp 3. So this is mainly addressing Katello users who have to get in contact with the backend. Then we will have a short break. Afterwards, Maria will have a feedback session to the new job invocation wizard. And Quirin will talk about Katello for Debian. Then another short break, and then Dana will give you a Red Hat Product Manager update, and Lukáš will tell you about the webhooks plugin. So this is our program for today, and if everything will work fine now, I will hand over to Melanie, our beloved community manager, so she can also welcome you. So Melanie, give me some seconds. I have to prepare this. No. This one is a correct one. So Melanie, if you share camera and audio, you will be online. And as you message, you can hear me, but we should hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me, Dirk?
I can hear you, and you should go to the stream. So if anyone can confirm in the chat.
Excellent, excellent. So I could hear you on the live stream there, but I cannot hear you through the live panel. So I will just speak. I will just speak. I don't think I appear. My camera doesn't seem to work, even though it's turned on as well. I suppose the long and the short of it is that the demo gods will have their blood, and hopefully this is this is just it for now. Okay, so I suppose I will apologize in advance for my Irish accent if anyone doesn't understand me. I'll try and slow down. So, first of all, I would love to just take a moment to welcome you all. I'm so glad to see so many of you have come so early in your day in some parts of the world, and just thank you very, very much. I'm also very glad that Foreman has reached its 12th birthday. It's not a lot of projects that can say that, so that's a pretty large achievement. So well done to everyone who's been involved in it over the years. And I'd like to also just quickly thank Dirk and the NetWays team for organizing this celebration and hosting us all today. And I also hope that the talks are a good reflection of the latest developments in the community, and the roadmap updates give you an idea also of what you have to look forward to in the future. I'm keeping my fingers crossed also that this will be the last time that we gather virtually to celebrate. I look forward to seeing you all in person next year, whenever and wherever that may be. Earlier on in the chat session that I hope you'll all join, Dirk mentioned that the air conditioning is now fixed in the NetWays event room, and if any of you were present for the last NetWays hosted birthday party, you'll remember that was a feature of the day, shall we say? So I'm looking forward to testing out that aircon, and if you're feeling nostalgic for the good old days of when we gathered together, Brian Carney has suggested that now is probably a good time that you switch off your air conditioning and you relive those moments that we shared together. And just before I leave you to the first talk, I have one announcement, or should I say maybe a request of you. We were a bit late with getting the Foreman community survey ready, so we decided to hold off and to launch it today at the birthday party. So throughout the day, I'm going to drop a link to the Foreman community survey, and I would really love if you could complete this for us, so we don't, because we care, I suppose, about privacy and data privacy in particular, we don't do any particular metrics gathering for the Foreman. So everything that we know about your experience is what you report to us, and the more that you do tell us, the more it will help focus and prioritize items for the year ahead. So I will drop a link after I go quiet now, and I just wish you all a very, very happy afternoon, morning, wherever you are. And if you have any questions, just feel free to reach out at any point. And I hope everything goes well today. Thank you so much, Dirk, for this.
So, thanks, Melanie, for being here. And as everyone is already saying thank you, I will also start with this. I have to thank my colleagues from our event teams, and particularly or additionally Christian, who helped me with the setup. So it's really, hopefully this such easy that I only have to press some buttons and everything will work. Let's see. And so I will really start now with pressing the first button and give you the first talk. It's Manisha on ACD.
Hello everyone, this is Manisha Singhal and I am software developer at Artix. Today I am here to talk about deploying servers in application-centric way. Since we are all attending Foreman birthday party, so I assume I don't need to give introduction about what Foreman can do. But Foreman platform can be extended to plugins, and I am here to talk about one of them, more specifically about Foreman ACD, which is short for Foreman Application Centric Deployment. Now to deploy a host in Foreman, first you have to select the operating system. You can select any of the CentOS, SUSE, Red Hat, or Ubuntu, Oracle, etc. Then you have to deploy that operating system on a host. You can also select if you want to deploy the host bare metal or you want to use virtual machines like VMware, Proxmox, or you want to deploy it on cloud, for example on Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, Azure, etc. Once the host is deployed, you can configure them. You can configure them manually or you can use one of the configuration tools like Puppet, SaltStick, Ansible, etc. Now suppose we want to set up a web application that stores the data and visualizes it. The web application uses Elastic nodes to store the data and Kibana node to visualize the data. Now once these servers are deployed, you can start adding data to your Elastic nodes clusters and then visualize them on Kibana node. To achieve this goal in Foreman, we need 3 Elastic clusters and 1 Kibana node server. Now in host-centric way, first you have to configure the host environment, which includes configuring the operating systems, host groups, domain, etc. Then you have to provision the 4 hosts by configuring them and then clicking the create host 4 times. Then configure each host individually. Again, you can do that manually or use configuration tools like Ansible, SaltStick, Puppet, etc. And then you have to make sure that all hosts are up and running and connected, which means if Kibana node host requires data, then it should be accessible from Elastic nodes hosts, and Elastic host should know from which host the requests are permissible. That is, Kibana host should have access to Elastic node host, which means you have to contact the host multiple times in the right sequence. This can be achieved using Ansible playbook. If you create tasks like Kibana node should first ask the Elastic node for data, and then Elastic node should give the Kibana node the permission, and then Elastic node sends the data to Kibana node. But only if you create every of these services in one playbook, which would not be possible if you are using host-centric deployment. To run the application properly, we need to configure the host and hope they are connected to each other. But ideally, we want to create a template that configures everything at one places and can have parameters defined, and with one button click create all the servers and run the application. This is the main idea of application-centric deployment. That is, to create the application template that configures everything at one place and have the option to configure the parameters and deploy the host at only one place with just one click, so that all the hosts are deployed all together, and then run the Ansible playbook. Now this can be achieved with the newly developed plugin Foreman ACD, which defines application-centric deployment and describes an approach to provision and configure hosts to run an application which requires predefined set of services and interconnection. Now let's talk about how we can achieve this with Foreman ACD. For that, we first have to create an Ansible playbook which can configure all the services. That sends and stores it in application definition, which acts as a template that can be used multiple times by application instance. Application instance then will deploy all the hosts or servers at once and set them up and configure them up. So these are the main components of ACD, which is Ansible playbook, application definition, and application instance. Foreman and ACD also have some roles, namely admin role and user role. Admin has all the access to Foreman ACD, so they can create the application template, configure them, deploy them, and set them up. And user has access to deploying the servers and using them, since user doesn't really care to configure them as long as they have the right configuration. Now let me give you a quick demo about how you can provision and configure the host to run an application using Foreman ACD. Yeah. So to create an application, first you have to create an Ansible playbook. So let's have elk1 because I already have elk. Now we have two options. First is directory. So you store the Ansible playbook directory in your system and pass the path of that directory here, which should be the exact path, or you can use git to directly fetch Ansible playbook data from the GitHub. So I already have Ansible playbook in GitHub, so I will use that. So I'll copy it. Now I have to select the branch, commit or tag. So here I am choosing the branch and then hit sync. Yeah. Now I have to mention the play file, which is the playbook file name. So this is the exact playbook file name which we have to mention here and submit it. Now the Ansible playbook have group variables which store the configuration values for servers like Kibana or Elastic nodes, which you have to import. So we have successfully loaded the Ansible group variables. Now we have to create the application template which uses Ansible playbook and is defined in application definition. So let's create one. Elk, run again. So we need 3 Elastic servers and 1 Kibana node. So Elastic, let's select the host group CentOS. Let's have minimum host of 1, although we need 3, but we can have 1 for now. And then Kibana. Again, we can have a minimum and maximum count here. Now here you can also edit the Ansible parameters for these nodes. So for example, if I want to change the firewall ports, I can change it here, or you can also log these parameters. You can also have Foreman parameters here. For example, if I want to have compute profile, if the server is too large, I want to have very large compute resource, so I can have it compute profile, so I can have large, etc. But I don't need it because it's really small. Yeah, so we will create it. Now suppose you want to reuse it in another system. What you can do is export it, and in another system you hit import. Suppose you name it Elk cluster. So let's say this one, and then you import. What this do is it imports the Ansible playbook as well as app definition. So first we will have the service name, CentOS host group, and assign it to a host group. So this import function only imports the app definition and Ansible playbook, but since each service requires host group, So when you are importing the application template, you have to assign the host group to each service. Then you submit it here. So it creates the application definition. So you can see here you will have all the data for the Elastic, and it also creates the Ansible playbook, which can be shown here. So ELK2, because ELK and ELK1 was already there. Now we need to utilize this template and create host from it. So let's create host, use ELK1. So we need one Kibana node, one Kibana host. Now you can see that it required at least one host, so it was giving warning as well that you need to have at least one one host for the service Kibana. And for Elastic also we said that it requires at least one of the hosts, so we should have at least one host for this. Yeah, so now it is giving me error that the host name Elastic1 is already used. So if there is already a host with the same name you are creating, even if it's not created by Foreman ACD, it will throw an error. So you should have unique host name system wide. So let's name it something else, node1. Okay, so you can't have underscore as well. Okay, now Elastic node2 and Elastic node3, and then you submit it. So this will create the app instance, but it has not deployed the host yet. So you can deploy it from here, but we have created 4 hosts, so it will take time, but I have already deployed a host for the demo purpose. So in ELK we had host named Elastic1, Elastic2, Elastic3, Kibana1, which can be shown here, 1, 2, 3 and Kibana. And again, if you want to redeploy the hosts, so you have 2 options. You can delete all the existing hosts, so it will delete all the hosts from here and then redeploy them. Or if you just edited some of the hosts and created 1 or 2 hosts, you can have the option to deploy only those hosts which are newly created or modified newly. So you can have that as well. Once the hosts are deployed, it shows the report as well. So these are the hosts. It says that all the setup is completed for Elastic2 as well. You can see the last deployment task here. So it was success, configuration jobs. So it will show the job invocation for the Ansible playbook. And you can also run the playbook or customize it first once the hosts are deployed. So if you want to customize it, you can have it here. You can set variables, different variables. For example, you want to debug, you can have multiple verbose levels. You can add the tags, skip tags, etc. Now let's jump back to the presentation. Now, as any other software, the present Foreman ACD can further be improved, and we already have some future plans for Foreman ACD, which is to add more reusable application templates, which includes Ansible playbooks and app definition at one place, which can directly be used and can be available at GitHub. We already added some of the Ansible playbooks on GitHub, but we are planning to add more Ansible playbooks. Also, we have right now simple data types in Ansible parameters, for example, Boolean, integer, strings, etc. But we are planning to have an option to add complex data types as well, for example, hash, YAML, etc. And as always, the possibility to enhance the graphical user interface is always there, like creating multiple hosts with same configuration with one click. That is, if you are creating an multiple host in app instance and they have the same configuration, and for example you have to create a host with same configuration 10 times, so instead of clicking 10 times you can have an option to create one and then say I want to have 10 more like these, so just enter 10 and clone it, and it should create all those hosts. And adding more tests, because why not? The more the tests, the better the plugin. Now I will also show you the Ansible playbooks we currently have and how you can create your own directory of Ansible playbook. Here, since if you're deploying a host and you have existing Ansible roles, you can easily create your Ansible playbook. Just create the Ansible playbook, say host all, or if you're talking about particular host, and give the roles to those hosts, and you can store those hosts in roles here. And each Ansible playbook has some group variables for configuration. You can have it in group vars, and that's it. And then you can easily create your own application using Foreman ACD. Now I will show you some more information. So we have GitHub page for Artix, and we have already have Foreman ACD repository at GitHub. We already created 2 Ansible playbook repositories for you, so feel free to use them and create your web applications. And if you have any suggestions, feedbacks, or issues, feel free to create the issues on Foreman ACD, and we will be happy to answer you. So this is it for today. Thank you so much, and if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Hello.
So, thank you, Manisha, for your talk. I will have you live in some seconds. So, I hope YouTube keep up. So, now you are live, and your audio is live too. So, if you want, switch on your camera. And I have not seen any questions coming up. So there is only one I prepared already. And this is, how big would you think is the effort to get ACD running if you already have the Ansible roles?
Yeah. Can you repeat your question?
Okay, how big is the effort if you have already Ansible roles and now you want to use Foreman ACD? How much do you think you need for such a topic?
Okay, so if you already have Ansible roles, all you have to do is bundle them up in one repository, create a Ansible playbook so that it uses the roles that the way you want, and then it's just configuration which hardly takes 5 minutes. if you have installed Foreman ACD plugin. So first you create Ansible plugin. So the best thing is you can have those rules and bundle them in one repository and upload it to GitHub and pull it in Ansible playbook from in Foreman ACD, and then you can just create the app definition and instance and deploy host with that. Is
Yeah.
your answer? Is your question?
Yeah, thanks. I was just looking because now questions are coming up. So Ewald is asking, you have to fill in Git branch, but can't auto detect the default branch. So if you do not fill in the Git branch, will it take the default branch, or what will happen?
No. So we made it sure that you fill the branch, because nowadays sometimes the default branch is master, so sometimes it's main or develop. So the plugin get confused. So you have to fill either the branch tag or commit. So it's a required field.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? Because YouTube is about 10 seconds or something behind. No further questions. So thanks again, Manisha, for your talk and being here to answer questions. If someone has a question later and you are still online, so perhaps someone can still ask questions in the channel for the talk, or can find you later on the social event. So
Yeah, sure.
let's
For having
see
me.
later.
Yeah.
So thanks, Manisha. I will switch back to the talk view and will give you Matthias' talk about Pulp. So he will start in 10 seconds.
Hello everybody, and welcome to my talk at the Foreman Birthday Party 2021. My name is Matthias Dellweg, and I am working as a software engineer with the Pulp team at Red Hat. I was kindly asked to give an introduction talk to Pulp 3 at this event. So I thought, well, this is a backend. If everything runs smoothly, you wouldn't even notice as it's there. What can I talk about it? But here I am, and my talk, named Pulp 3 Introduction for Katello Users, Exploring the Backend and Tracing Issues, will be structured like this. First, I will give a short introduction about what is Pulp and what it can do for you. Those of you who know Katello for a while will also have their own history with Pulp too, so a brief comparison is in order. Second, I will show you a way to explore what Katello has put into its Pulp backend. To this end, I will introduce you to the native Pulp command line interface. And last, as we all know, we do not live in a perfect world, I will give some pointers where and how to look for clues if something went wrong. So, what is Pulp 3? Well, Pulp 3 is the successor of Pulp 2. Who would have thought that? So what is Pulp in general? With Pulp, you can sync or upload software packages and then later publish them in their native format and distribute them to clients to be consumed by the native programs like Yum or apt or pip for Python packages, for example. Pulp is a plugin-based program that is controlled via a REST API. And this makes it suitable to be a backend in Katello. It's the backend that owns all your content. If that sounds scary, it is a little bit. While Pulp will also appear in other contexts, and for example, Ansible Automation Hub, Ansible Galaxy, or Rui can be named here, this talk will focus only on a Katello setup. So, if you knew Pulp 2 and you want to know what's different, well, Pulp has been rewritten from scratch. To my knowledge, there's not a single line of code that was copied. In this process, the database backend was changed and it was switched from MongoDB to Postgres. This means that the NoSQL database was changed for a full relational database. In Pulp 3 there are still repositories, obviously, but there has been a new concept introduced called repository versions that will live between repositories and the content. So a repository can have multiple versions with different content, and adding or removing content or syncing new content into a repository will usually result in a new version of that same repository. In Pulp 2 there were so-called distributors that were responsible for getting the packages to the clients, and this concept has been replaced by two concepts called publications and distributions. So publications are usually used to create and calculate all the metadata you need for a repository, and then once that is done, and that can be a time-consuming step, a distribution will serve that publication, and creating a distribution is really a almost atomic step. So this gives you more control over when exactly your content will be available to your clients. Next, the consumer concept was completely dropped from Pulp. So the upgrade and errata status calculation in our case has moved to Katello. This has been done because Pulp decided to do one thing properly, and this was just not part of it anymore. Another thing to notice is that the Pulp 2 distributors created tons of symlink in order to publish the content, and this concept has been changed to a scalable content app that will look up in the database where content is found and then serve it on the fly from disk. And it is scalable because you can run almost infinitely many content apps. The list goes on. In Pulp 3 you can sync repositories fully or on demand. This is so-called download policies, and this is now a core concept which was formerly only available to a small amount of plugins. Pulp 3 can be installed on-premise in a single container or in a fully containerized environment with an operator. Pulp 3 is better scalable than Pulp 2, and it can be operated with high availability because almost all components can be run multiple times and even on different hosts or in different containers. Also, Pulp can use the local disk storage of your machine, or it can store its artifact into cloud storage, which makes it even more scalable. And last but not least on this list, Pulp 3 is written with plugin writers in mind, so it's much easier to write content plugins for Pulp 3 than it was ever for Pulp 2. On to our next topic, exploring the backend. Why should we even do that? Well, let's say for this time, just out of curiosity. As I told before, Pulp has a REST API, and so the only way to look at things here, or the only proper way to look at things here, is calling out to the REST API. And sure, you can use curl to do that, a command for just getting pulp status would be curl -k --cert, and then the path to the pulp client certificate, the same with its key, and then in the end https://localhost/pulp/api/v3/status/, and this will provide you a JSON output of containing all the installed plugins with their versions and a number of workers that are running and so on. But there's also a native command line interface, and with that the same command translates to simply pulp status, and the output will look almost the same. So the question is where to get this CLI. We are currently looking into packaging it for Katello, which sadly has some obstacles around. So for the time being, I highly recommend that you install it by hand in a virtual environment. So you should set up a Python virtual environment with a version of Python 3. And once you activated that, you can simply pip install pulp-CLI. Once you did that, you should configure it to talk to your Katello instance. And that can be done by calling pulp config edit, and then you will present it an editor, and you make sure that the config looks roughly like this, where you specify the base URL where your pulp lives and the certificate and key to talk to your pulp, and until you put the Katello server certificate into the certificate storage, you need to switch off SSL verification. But here I want to add a highlight on this last line. You should specify dry run to true, because Katello is using pulp as a backend, and once we poke around with the pulp command line interface into pulp and change things, it may lead to inconsistency with what Katello thinks that is in pulp. And so this dry run option will prevent the CLI from performing any dangerous actions. If at some point you really need to do something, you can always override it with a --force flag. So once you have installed the CLI, you can start looking into pulp, and this can be done by a command, for example, pulp repository list, which will provide you again JSON output with a list of all the repositories in your pulp server. And I've abbreviated this a lot because the output is much longer. So what you will see is a repository record between those two curly braces that has a relative pulp href. It will have another href where you can look at all the repository versions, and the latest repository version href is the interesting part here, because it shows that we already have a version number 1 for latest. This means that I have already synced content into this repository, because otherwise the first version would be 0. And then there are some more metadata about this repository, for example, its name. In this case, it's the name provided by Katello, a description, the time of creation, and so on. As I said, the output is JSON output, so you can always use JQ to perform any operations on it. In this case, I just said unwrap the list and extract the names of all repositories in the system. And you can see I've created all the usual suspects here. The next command we can look at is, if you already know the name of your repository, you can directly look at it with a command like pulp file repository show --name and then the name of the repository, and the output will look roughly the same as before. In case you don't know what commands to use, in this Pulp CLI at any point you can add a -- help, and it will tell you all available subcommands and to all commands the available options. So obviously there are not only repositories in Pulp, but there are also remotes and publications and distributions, and for all of those corresponding commands are implemented in the Pulp CLI. But to look at what is currently happening in Pulp, it is interesting to look at tasks, and tasks can also be shown by calling the pulp task list command, and you can filter them by their state. And in this case, I'm filtering the tasks by running, so this shows the one running task at the moment. And you can see that the name in the task record is the function that is executed here. Then there is something called a logging CID, which looks like a UUID. Keep that in mind, I will come to that later. Then tasks usually have progress reports, and this is again vastly abbreviated. The progress reports are usually there to tell you what the task has already done, and so you can follow how far it has already been. Last but not least, on this slide I have selected the reserved resources record, and this is the list of resources that this task is supposed to work with, and this is also used as a kind of lock, so no other task can be running at the same time using the same repository as specified here and the same remote, or the same remote. So when you are interested in tasks that are related to a specific repository, you can also look up the tasks by a reserved resource, and the CLI has a useful subcommand for this. In this case it's pulp file repository task list, and you specify the repository name, and it will list you all the tasks that were performed on this repository in the history. And as you can see, the task from before is now completed at this time. So let's assume something went wrong and we want to know how to look for more information about it. Well, there's always log files, and you might want to know Pulp 3 writes all its logs to varlog messages at the moment. This is known to be not ideal, and this is currently being revisited, so expect proper log files like varlog pulp something in the future here. Another way to look at it is using the journal control, because pulp services are run with systemd on Katello. And what you can do here is you can call journal control -u and then pulpcorr -star, or actually if you want to be more specific, you can also specify pulpcorr -api or pulpcorr -worker star, or whatever other service you want to look at in more detail. And this will then only list Pulp's messages. When there is an error while a task was performed, then the task will be set to failed and the error will be recorded on the task. So the natural way to look at this is obviously task list state failed, which will list all the failed tasks with the latest one first. So we can perform a JQ operation on this by selecting the first item in the list, which will be the last in time. And then I performed another transformation which will only show us the logging CID and the error itself. And if you look at the error, there will be a traceback, which is again abbreviated for the space I have on this slide. And this will be a rather unreadable long string here. But there's the description, which is hopefully enough to see in a glance what's going wrong here. In this case, no valid release file found for Ragnarok, which means that the URL seems to be wrongly configured, so the release file of this Debian repository wasn't found and the server returned a 404 error. But at some time you really want to know what the traceback is showing you, and it is not necessary that you can read this unformatted string on the fly. You can, however, do another JQ transformation here, and this translates to Pulp task list state failed, which is the same as before, and then JQ now -R, which means raw output. And again, we select the first failed task, or in time the last, and then we select the error traceback field of it. This is the string, and by adding the -R, we really output it as raw string, and this will translate all the \n things to line breaks again, and therefore we get a nicely formatted traceback of this task. And we see the raise of a no release file exception led to this error message that the release file wasn't found, and that sounds reasonable. So as a very last, I told you there's the logging CID that is saved on the tasks. This is a so-called correlation ID, and a correlation ID will be created by every single call you make to the Foreman API. It will be passed around to any subsequent call the Foreman process does to any backend, and it will be passed along the Foreman tasks even. And then in turn, when passed down to the Pulp backend, and Pulp will trigger a task, it will save this very UUID as the logging CID on the field, as a field on the Pulp task. And every single logging event will be prepended by this logging CID. And this means you can easily grab for corresponding logs. Funny enough, no one calls it correlation ID. In Foreman tasks, it's called the current request ID, and in Pulp, it's called the logging CID. Keep in mind, when you look at the Foreman tail to see logs, Rails will abbreviate this correlation ID, which is usually a UUID, to its first, I think, 6 digits. But that's usually enough to grab for all the corresponding actions that were performed in any front end or back end for this very call to the Foreman API. With that, I want to thank you for listening. And if you have further questions, there will be a questionnaire after this has been broadcasted. And if you have questions later, you can always visit us at pulpproject.org, and you can chat with us on the Pulp Dev channel on Matrix or LiberaChat. My nickname there is X9C4. And if you are interested in updates about Pulp, then please subscribe to our mailing list, which is also called Pulp Dev on the list manredhat.com.
So, thank you, Matthias, for your talk. And I have only one question, so I will bring you up. And now your audio is also on. So the only question was also the one I had in mind when hearing your talk. It was about when will we get hands-on the CLI, when will it be packaged? And I saw that Ewout and Evgeny were already working on this. So we will see this. The other was about the Pulp CLI for Debian, which was already addressed to Quirin. So let's see if someone else comes up with questions for you.
Yeah, I hope I'm hearing the right sound at the right time and not 10 seconds late now. I can add the CLI was packaged today, finally.
Today. Great. So I fear no one is asking questions, so this is always a good or bad sign for the talk. I think here it is a good sign, so there's no question open for Pulp. So, do you have anything else to tell?
Thank you for having me giving a talk here, and I can only encourage all of you to really have a look at the back end and not just use it as, oh, Katello will handle it for me.
So thanks again, Matthias, for being here and also for being prepared for questions. So as nothing is coming up, I give YouTube 10 seconds to follow up. No. It really seems like there is no further question. So thanks.
There's
Matthias.
a question coming up at this very moment.
We will wait. Because if not, I have to fill all the break with some talking. So, no.
You're still writing the question?
So I can already see
but
it.
I can state the question. It is, there are a lot of remote options not exposed by Katello, but it is probably unwise to use those directly. And then there's a question mark. And well, there's two points to this question. If you're using Pulp directly, then you're free to use every option that is presented there. But on the other hand, when using Pulp with Katello, it's always suggested to not change anything in Pulp directly, but use Katello to steer your Pulp. So I believe this is a yes to this question. Thank you.
So for Katello users, it's look only with Pulp CLI. This is still good for me. Okay, I only see people excited about our adventure in the chat. So thanks, Matthias. I will switch back to the talk panel and will give you some chat and then we will start in some minutes with Maria's talk. I want not to be too far off from the planned schedule, so people are not missing something. So thanks, Matthias. Bye.
Thank you, and see you later.
So I recognized everyone is already playing with Work Adventure, and I already recognized we have over 60 people viewing the event already live on YouTube. So I really think this is a success. So because everyone is already playing with it, Work Adventure is really giving you a virtual reality in a Super Mario Zelda style. So if you're as old as I or older, you will probably know this 8-bit look, and you can simply walk around there. I was already told Melanie is stalking people there, and just if you cross by to anyone, you can talk to him. So cameras will be switched on, and Jitsi will popping up. So if you really want to enjoy this, I also prepared there 4 marked areas that are meant for technical discussions, as I had to use the layout from the StackConf, because unfortunately the colleague who prepared all this was ill and sat at the school. So we have, if you are going inside, on the left side of the Work Adventure, 3 rooms for Foreman, Katello, and plugin discussion. On the left side, there is some area where we will later find me and perhaps someone of ethics next to the desks. And there are also links to our both companies, as we are doing this event together. And in the main hall, there should be a working link for the YouTube stream, but for some reasons it is not working. So jump on the YouTube stream, or you have to have 2 tabs open. And on the on the right side of the main hall, there's also a discussion area for UI UX, as this will be the topics I expect to come up with today's talks. So this is what Work Adventure is providing you. It's giving you the option to walk around like we would have with a normal non-pandemic conference. And I thought, and as it worked for StackConf quite well, this would be a great idea and a great option to give you as much conference feeling as possible. So, yeah. Is a cat someone, or is a cat a cat? You can have different avatars. Not all will be human, I think. And there's also one person, like a foot stand or something, in front of the meeting, of the conference room. So if this person is not answering you, this is really only for decoration. But yeah, everyone else should be a real person you can cross by. And the cat I see in the chat is really just something you can add to your avatar so it will follow you. And yeah, this worker venture, it's really also an open source thing, so you can get up the software running. You have to create some JSON definition to get all this up and running, get rooms, you can add avatars, get your own tiles and all your own designs. So yeah, it's planned that we at NetRace will perhaps get also something if pandemic will keep us longer out of the office. And yeah, so I had some first experience and I was curious about how it will work. And I see people are excited, so I think it was a good decision and a good recommendation from our events team. So yeah, enjoy. And let's see, I promised the next talk to start 10 minutes after. So, yeah, okay. It's dangerous to go alone, take this cat. Yeah. As you see earlier, Melanie is stalking, so I hope this is only danger. Yeah. So, who is popping up in the live panel? It is. Is it Melanie or is it already for the next talk? No. I don't see it at the moment, so it's no one who won't help me here with the chat. It looks at least so. Okay, it's not Melanie, so she's only stalking at Work Adventure. Then it's probably only already Maria, so she's quite early. But I have planned her to be live more time after her talk because this is really what makes the Foreman community great. So we will have really here a feedback session. So you will see a demo and you can really give feedback and influence how this job wizard will look in the future. And I really don't know what to talk about. I simply will now press a button as Maria is already online and will start Maria's talk. I hope the introduction slide is correct now. If not, I have mixed up more things, so I hope everything else is fine. If it's only the introduction slide, I'm still relieved. So enjoy Maria's talk.
Hi, my name is Maria, and I'm working on the Foreman and Foreman's plugins UI. And currently I'm working on a new UI for the job invocation form. We thought that as the form is very complicated and it has a lot of changing elements, it would be best to present it as a wizard. So right now I'm working on that wizard and it's still in development and there are new designs that are being worked on. So if you have any feedback on this demo, please let me know. If you see something that was working before and will not work in this wizard, or if you have any comments about how it is, how is the experiences, let me know in the Q&A if you have questions or on IRC or on email, and I will be happy to answer your questions or make it work better. Yeah. And this demo will be split into two parts. In the first part, I want to show how the job invocation form is compared to the job wizard. So you will be able to see that the elements are the same if they are just presented differently. And then I want to do a demo to show all the different possibilities and all the different use cases that a user can use the form, the job wizard. And let's start. So first of all, the user will select a category and template for the job. It is the same, it just looks a bit differently, and there are two select boxes, and a user will just select, and then the rest of the steps will open up once the user will select a job template. After that, the step is target hosts and inputs. Here a user will be able to select which host should the job run on. In the old form, the user could select bookmarks and a search query, but in this form we wanted the user to have more flexibility, so they can just select hosts just using a select box, or host collections, or even host groups. And of course they can still use the search query and use bookmarks as they could in the old form. Also in this step is included the template inputs. In this template it is a command search and task search, as you can see in the form here. Next we have the advanced fields. In the job invocation form, those fields were hidden by this button chevron, and in this job wizard they will be just shown as a step. It is of course skippable, and the user it's not mandatory for a user to fill it in, but these are just template input fields that are marked as advanced, like prescript and postscript, and the job's advanced fields like effective user and password. We changed the description, as in the old form there will just pop another box to edit the description, and here you can just click on the set the custom job description to edit the description. Yeah. So there's the button here, and you can just edit the description and it will be edited with parameters or without parameters. Okay, next we have the schedule step. The schedule in the form was pretty complicated, and it was like jumping around. And if you choose execute now, some of the fields will disappear or schedule for future execution. It will also, some fields will show up and some will be removed. Here we wanted to present it all without any jumping, so you can choose if you want to execute now or schedule for later, and you can just choose if you don't want to fill in the start or end date. There are also a few more fields that can be selected and filled, and those will be shown in the advanced scheduling. Advanced scheduling will open up a modal and will show all the extra fields. And lastly, a user can review all the input that they have inputted in the different fields or selected. They will be able to see them here and decide if they want to run the job or go back to one of the other steps and edit something to make it more correct, and then they can run the job as they desire. Okay, and next let's open up Foreman. Okay, so here we are in the run job wizard. It is currently under lab features, job wizard, and let's just open it again. Yeah, as it is being currently developed. Again, if you have any feedback, I would love to hear it so we can make the best job wizard. So I will select the category. For me, it's commands, and I can see the demo template here is already selected. Of course, I can also search, for example, demo, and select it. Okay, and next, that's the target hosts and inputs. Here I can select a host just by clicking on it, or if I want, I can search for it and select it here. Can also do the same for host collections and for host groups, which I don't have. Also, there is a search query that I can use as a normal search query with bookmarks. So for example, I will choose active, and then it will be added, and of course I can also edit it, and see, and organization equals this, and it will be edited in the search query here. If a user wants to remove one of the hosts, they can just remove it, and it won't be used to run the job. The job will be run on either one of these hosts, or on these host collections, or on hosts that fit this search query. And of course, a user will be able to see all of the selected hosts by clicking on this button that counts how many hosts were already selected for all of the parameters. Next, we have the template inputs. I will just enter here test input, and for example, this is a task search, so it has the task autocomplete and task bookmarks. Yes, there is a UI bug here. So let's say I'll select failed, and it will fill it up. The old job invocation form didn't have bookmarks in the template inputs, and so we added it here. Let's see, and so yeah, those are the inputs for my template. And next there are the advanced inputs. As this is a demo, I wanted to show all of the possibilities for a job template. So there is a date picker, there is a search, there is a big text box, and of course you can also add a select box here. And then there is the advanced fields of the job and the description. So the description is a template, so it can run command, and command is an input that was entered in the previous step. So I can edit it and add run command test, and see run test input, and then my entered text, which is test. The command is shown here. Here, command input, test input, and it's the description of the job. It's the name that you will see when the job is running, and the rest are just normal fields as there were in the form. Next, we have the schedule. There are many scheduling options, so you can schedule it to run now, and the job will just start and run once. Or you can select to run it in the future, and then it will start on a start date that the user would choose. For example, I can choose this from the date type picker. And if I want it to run forever, I will just keep it checked never ends, so it will just keep running until I stop it manually. Also, there are a few options for when does the job should run. So if I choose, for example, weekly, it will run every week, and I can choose on Monday and Friday, and then it will run every week starting from the 24th of June, and it will never end. If I want it to end on some date, I can uncheck this and select some date. Then it will end on this date. Also, there are a few advanced options that you can see here. You can select when that a job should start before some date, and you can choose that a job should, if you want a job to end after a few times of running. So for example, if you want the job to only run 5 times, you can enter 5 here and it will only run 5 times and then it will stop running. Next, there is the review details, which is not ready as this is still a demo and still a work in progress. And this is where the user will be able to view a summary of all of the entered fields and choose if they want to run the job or select some other or input some other input. For example, I can change here test input, or maybe I want to schedule it on a different time, and then I go back to review and I will run it after that. So this is the job wizard. There are PRs open in the remote execution repository and it's being worked on, and we are having conversations with the designers on how best to design it. So any feedback that you have would be really appreciated. And yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
So thank you, Maria. Give me a second and I will have you online. Now your audio is also hearable to the stream. So there was one question from Ewout you already answered in the talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes. So you probably can also not hear me. So audio is probably on the YouTube stream. If you can hear me there. No. It switched me. It muted me. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, all the buttons to press. So there was one question from Ewout about scaling in the talk channel. And there was one from Marek and also in the talk channel from someone else about skipping some steps in the wizard, as there are options where it is pre-filled, so you could run this directly with skipping some steps, and there's also the question for having a run on whole hosts option. So these are the 3 questions for you.
Yeah, I see the question from Marek. Well, currently there isn't a way because I didn't know that was an option, which is why we have this demo. But I will look into that. And about the hosts, the host selection, a user should start filling the name of the host, and if there are more than 100 hosts that answer that part of the name, they will be asked to add more text until there are less than 100 hosts. And I will look into what Leos suggested about a run on all hosts, because it definitely will make sense.
Yeah, so I also have to repeat what many others already said, that this is a really great and good improvement with the wizard. And I also agree on Marek's suggestions. This was also something I had in mind as a question. So, any other ideas for Maria? Any other questions? Is there someone on YouTube? No. No, it seems like everyone is happy with your work. So this is great. And there are no questions.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. So thanks for being here. And perhaps see you later in Work Adventure.
See ya.
Bye, Maria.
Bye.
And so this time I did not forget to switch off desktop audio. So if my mic sounds bad or something, please remember me. So let's directly dive into talk number 4 by Quirin about the Debian support of Katello.
Hello everyone, my name is Quirin Pamp. I work for ATIX and I'm going to talk to you about Katello's Debian/Ubuntu/apt support. So what do I mean when I talk about Katello for apt-based systems? Well, I'm not talking about Foreman's ability to deploy Debian and Ubuntu hosts. Rather, I'm talking about Katello's ability to synchronize and host apt repositories, thereby providing content management and ultimately patch management for such hosts. I last held a talk on this topic, not one, but 2 Foreman birthday parties ago. And back then that talk focused heavily on Debian errata support. And now I'm starting my talk with the bad news, which is that 2 Foreman birthday parties on, that errata support has still not been merged to Katello. So why are major features stuck in review? The short answer is Pulp 3, Pulp 3, and you guessed it, Pulp 3. So just to ensure that Katello's apt support continues to exist with the transition to Pulp 3 has bound a lot of development resources and also caused a lot of churn for long-running, large upstream pull requests. The slightly more complicated answer is that there's something called the deb version AVR Postgres extension, which also had something to do with it. But before I get to that, I want to get to the good news, which is that Pulp 3 based Katello apt support is here and it's steadily improving. The Pulp 2 to 3 content migration for apt content is here and steadily improving. We've published Katello clients for Debian 10 and Ubuntu 20 on apt-atix.de. That's seen some enthusiastic community response and marks the first time that there's been a readily available full proof of concept for using the subscription manager with Katello and apt. And finally, the PostgreSQL deb version EVR Postgres extension is here. So I mentioned that before. So what is this extension? It's a Postgres extension, and it allows Debian version comparisons directly in the database. So for example, this is a version of 2 different Vim packages from 2 different Debian distributions. And as you can imagine, such version comparisons are pretty frequent within Katello if you're doing things like patch management and content management. So why has this been a problem? Well, we have had two design constraints for this extension. It needs to be enabled via a Katello migration, and that limits us in various ways because the system user running Katello migrations doesn't have root privileges. And we also didn't want to just go ahead and copy and paste the entire extension into a migration. So the current iteration of the extension is written in PLPG SQL. There was a C-based version in the past, which again couldn't be enabled without root privileges. And the current iteration also doesn't add a new database type, it just adds the deb version compare function, which is roughly what we had at the very beginning when we started implementing this. So that's a bit of complaining on my part. It was very difficult and we've been chased around in circles by it. And now we're mostly ready. We're just waiting on the packaging PR for that now. Okay, so what features are dependent on this extension? Well, first and foremost, the Debian and Ubuntu errata support. Then something called deb package applicability, which is really part of the errata story, but in a separate PR. And finally, there's content view filtering for deb packages. So that's about adding the ability to filter Katello content views by version or package name or architecture. Okay, so for everyone who doesn't remember my Debian errata support talk from 2 Foreman birthday parties ago, I'm just gonna quickly go through that again. So errata are a concept from the RPM world, and there's no such thing as an apt errata in upstream Debian or Ubuntu repositories. What upstream does have, so in the case of Debian, is the Debian security advisories along with the corresponding packages in the Debian security repository. And Ubuntu has something similar called the Ubuntu security notices. And then for each Ubuntu release, there is a corresponding security distribution. So in addition to Focal, there's Focal security. And then to tie all of that together with Katello, there's the Artix Debian and Ubuntu errata service. So this service works by parsing the Ubuntu security announcements, Ubuntu security notices and Debian security announcements, and then serving these via an API for Katello to consume. So it basically brings it into a format that is more like an errata. And then the Katello instance, when you sync your Bionic security repository, for example, or your Debian security repository, you can provide it with an URL to your errata server, and then you will get errata in Katello. So what does this look like in Foreman? Here we have the errata URL in our Bionic security repository, and in this case, we've synced it and we've been given 169 errata. And once we have the errata in Katello, we can view them just like RPM errata. we can see the errata details, which lists the CVEs, the affected packages, and includes a description. And finally, we can apply and install these errata if we also have the applicability PR. The Debian errata works slightly different than the ones for RPM, since they are not synced into the underlying Pulp instance. They exist only on the Katello level, again, because errata is really an RPM concept that we've tucked on in Katello on top of the underlying Pulp. Okay, so the next feature I just want to really quickly talk to you about is content view filtering. And like I said before, it's about filtering packages in content views by name, architecture, or version. And I've added a little screenshot here from a work in progress version, and you can already see immediately that this version can only filter by name and architecture, but not yet by version, because the deb version ever Postgres extension is missing. And also that this current work in progress state actually only works for Pulp 2. So on this feature, there remains some work to be done. It's also different from the errata case in that we don't just need the Postgres extension for use by Katello, but we actually still need to implement a feature in the underlying Pulp plugin in order to fully implement content view filtering. Okay, so finally, or I'd like to have a more detailed look at the state of Pulp 3 support as it is in Katello now. And for that, I'd like to switch over to a live instance and have a look at that. So this is a cutting edge Katello 4.1 installation, and we are here looking at the infrastructure smart proxies, or we're looking at the bundled smart proxy. And if we go over to the services tab, we can see that on Pulp core, we have the deb content enabled. And this is Katello 4.1, so Pulp core, that is Pulp 3 is all we've got. And we have deb. So in theory, that's all there is to it. And I can stop right there because we've switched the backend to Pulp 3. And everything feature-wise should just work that used to work in Pulp 2. Well, that's the goal, but there are some known and open issues that we are still working on. So first of all, I'm going to go over here to products and just create a new repository here. And when we select Debian content, I want to talk a little bit about just the UI and the user experience there. So the UI gives you some hints. So for releases, it wants a white space separated list of releases, suites or codename to sync from, and the default value is stable. So it claims. This isn't actually quite true for Pulp 3 anymore. So in Pulp 3, releases, or distributions as it's called in the underlying Pulp plugin, is a required field, and if you don't put anything, it won't default to stable, it will throw an error. And also on the, for example, so this is Katello 4.1.1, I said. On Katello 3.18, if you still need to do a migration, the hints here don't talk of a whitespace separated list, but a comma separated list. So Pulp 2 wanted a comma separated list, and Pulp 3 wants a space separated list. And this is also an issue with the 2 to 3 migration. So the 2 to 3 migration will translate your comma-separated lists into space-separated lists for the underlying Pulp instance, but it won't actually do anything for the values stored within Katello. So you're still going to have comma-separated lists in Katello, and the next time you modify or save this field, and if you don't adjust it to space-separated, it might send the comma-separated list to the underlying Pulp instance. And in the case of the release field, that will cause a sync failure with the next sync, because it will interpret your comma-separated list as a single release with commas in it, and then it won't find that release, and then it can't sync. For the components and architectures fields, it's even worse. It will simply perform the sync, decide there aren't any components of that name with the commas in it, and say, well, if there aren't any components, I just don't sync anything, but report back that everything is fine and I've synchronized 0 packages. So of course, my preferred solution would be that we make sure that Katello, on the Katello side, can interpret both comma or space separated lists just for having that user continuity. And we need to rework the hints that Katello gives. Now, if I switch over here to an actual repository that I've synchronized, so this is the Debian 10 client we published on apt-artix.de, and I've already synchronized that, and I've used releases stable, components main, and architectures AMD64, which I could have left away since that's the only things that client has anyway. So if I don't put anything for components and architectures, it would have synchronized the same things. But that's a detail. The other thing I want to show you is, so we have here a associated GPG key. So upstream repository verification using a public GPG key still works in Pulp 3 the same way as it did in Pulp 2. But if we look at the published repository, you will find that I have here a release file, but no in-release file or release.gpg file. So this thing that Pulp 3 published is not itself signed, which is because I didn't set up a signing service for this Pulp installation. And yeah, so the only place where that is documented, how to set up a signing service, is in this thread in the Foreman community forum by my colleague. And it's a bit complicated and difficult to get right. And it's somewhat similar as it was in Pulp 2, but different. So even if you set up your Pulp 2 instance to sign repository metadata, you're going to have to do it again for Pulp 3, and it's going to be different. And the 2 to 3 migration definitely can't migrate that for you. So that's just another example for something where the documentation, user experience, and so on could be improved. Then there's some other issues that are known. So right now for Pulp 3, the mirror on sync feature only works or has problems if you set it to false. And that can lead to failed syncs when you sync repeatedly, as one usually does. So that's just a bug that we need to fix. The other thing community users have been reporting is that they're running into like download timeouts, and then the sync fails, and they need to sort of sync several times before they eventually get everything downloaded successfully. That may actually be an issue for Pulp core. I will need to talk to the Pulp core developers. I could be wrong about that. And yeah, the final thing I want to mention is that we've also had user reports that synchronizing to smart proxy from a Katello instance running Pulp 3 for Debian content causes problems, both for Pulp 2 smart proxies and for Pulp 3 smart proxies. So in the case of Pulp 2 smart proxies, that's actually a bug in Pulp 2 that has only been revealed by the switch to Pulp 3, but it's still something we need to fix. Okay, I'm just going to head back to my slides here. And so those were a few examples I just gave of the kinds of things that are still not working as well as we would like in Katello with Pulp 3 for Debian content. Moving on, I want to talk about I want to strike on a more positive note. So once we get all of those kinks ironed out, what are the new features that we can expect because we are now to Pulp 3? And I mean the new features specifically for Debian content. So the general, I'm not talking about the general benefits of Pulp 3 over Pulp 2, like simplifying the architecture and getting rid of MongoDB. Those are Pulp core topics. I'm talking about apt support or Debian, Ubuntu. Okay, so features. The first thing is the mirrored or verbatim sync for smart proxies. So in the Pulp 3 version of the Pulp Deb plugin, there is a feature called the verbatim publisher. And the verbatim publisher is basically a mirror mode that can synchronize, that can publish synchronized repositories exactly as they were in the upstream repository without regenerating any metadata. So it will just publish the upstream metadata. And for smart proxy syncs, this is probably exactly what we want because, well, we've already published the repository on the main Pulp instance, and we just want to mirror that exact same repository on the smart proxy. And a lot of the time that it takes to sync to the smart proxy is actually the smart proxy regenerating the same metadata that was already generated on the main Katello instance. So that's an efficiency improvement, and I believe Pulp RPM is working on something similar for RPM. Or they may have already finished it. I don't know exactly what the state of that is. Then there's installations from sync content. So again, the Pulp 3 version of the Pulp Deb plugin can already, again, using this verbatim publisher, publish repositories that include Debian installer packages and installer files. And so in principle, it's then possible to install hosts or use the Debian installer with that sync content. Now that has not yet been added to Katello in any way, shape or form, and there are some open design questions about how exactly to include that, but it's very much on our wish list. Okay, then I already talked about content view filtering for Deb packages. Again, that's waiting for the underlying feature in the Pulp Deb plugin. And finally, I just want to mention Debian source packages and repositories with a question mark, because that is actually coming in via a user contribution. So from outside of ATIX, but from what I've seen so far, the user who is working on that is very keen and pretty competent, and so I'm pretty confident that that will eventually get in, but it might take a couple of rounds of review and adding tests and adding documentation, because that's quite a big feature and story. Okay, I have a few more community topics I want to mention. we now have a monthly Katello and Pulp community integration meeting. So here my thanks goes out to Justin and Brand from Katello and Pulp for giving their time for that. And so far on the community side has been ATIX in this meeting, but it's a community meeting. Anyone who's interested is free to join, and I've put the URL where that meeting, or where the meeting minutes are announced, and where you can find this meeting. And that meeting has been a great help in just exchanging information about upcoming Katello issues and making sure that Debian and apt support is also on board. And it has also been a great help with getting ITIX more integrated into the upstream packaging and release process. And we are there now better placed to include bug fix releases for the underlying Pulp Debian plugin with Katello bug fix releases than we ever were in the days of Pulp 2. Okay, community communication. Again, this has been a great help. There's been so much discussion on the Foreman community forum, and there have been blogs, and we've published these community clients, and this feedback has been so valuable in getting to where we are now and identifying the open issues I've still mentioned and continuing with all of that. So again, my thanks to community users. This has been a big help. On the flip side, I mentioned we have various blogs, we have various topics in community.theforeman.org, and we have various pieces of documentation here, there, and elsewhere. And there isn't really a single port of call for new Katello users who want to use Debian and Ubuntu content to figure out what it is they need to know. So that's my pet project that I discussed with Melanie at one point. We might have something like an FAQ for Debian and Ubuntu content. Okay, and I just want to mention one more time, we have this draft PR for source package support because I'm just so happy about it, that we get contributions from outside of ATIX for the Ubuntu and Debian support. Okay, and I'm getting towards the end of my talk. So I want to summarize, first starting with achievements. So providing Pulp 3 based Debian support. Again, I cannot mention enough how much work that has been and how glad I am that it's there, all the problems notwithstanding. The same goes for the 2 to 3 content migration. Then providing the community clients on apt-atix.de, providing the PostgreSQL deb version extension for packaging, and then the better coordination with upstream in the meeting I just mentioned on the slide before, and also the great community interactions I've mentioned. I count those as an achievement. And so getting to the outlook, what are our goals going forward? So the immediate goals are packaging that Postgres deb version EVR extension and getting errata merged and getting package applicability merged. We are closer than we've ever been, and I'm hoping that this will be the last time we have to rebase and adjust these pull requests, and we can just get them into final review and be done. Then the other big thing is fixing outstanding Pulp 3 related issues that I've told you about. especially the smart proxy sync from Pulp3 based Katello instances. Okay, and then the next stage goals. So once we've finished these immediate goals, we're talking about new features, and the focus is going to be on mirrored smart proxy synchronization, so the performance improvement for the smart proxy sync, content view filtering, and installations from synced content. And then I put on my secondary goals, which are independent of the others and the larger roadmap, which is just improving the community documentation and hopefully creating that frequently asked questions or something similar. So we have something until we eventually hopefully get, a full feature documentation that talks about every detail. Okay, so that's everything I had to say, and thanks for listening. And I'm looking forward to the question and answer session that will follow on from this talk.
Thank you, Quirin, for your talk. It was a great one. And if you are ready, I'll bring you to the live stream. Give me a second. Now everyone can also hear you. And you should hear me too. No?
Okay.
Okay, you rejoined and I was muted again. So now you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So we had several questions. So it was about on-demand syncing, about the client.
So for on-demand syncing, my understanding is that this is mainly a Pulp feature and should in principle be possible. But I think, as was it Ebert who mentioned, if I guess Debian has a policy of cleaning up their remote repositories, then it won't work well for that reason. And also, I don't know how much testing we've done with using on-demand syncing in combination with Debian and Ubuntu repositories. So it's possible we've just missed something. But I think it should work in principle. What was the other question?
It was about the client. So you mentioned you forgot the CLI.
Yeah, so I guess I had the roadmap at the end, and I remember during Matthias's talk earlier that yes, Pulp CLI for Pulp Debian is also on our roadmap wish list, whatever you want to call it, but I don't know when we'll get to it exactly because we have a few things on there.
Yeah, of course. Everyone has too much on his to-do list, I think. So if you had to put some number on the progress, how much % do you think is already done? How much is left to do?
For the Pulp CLI, we haven't really started, but of course upstream has started a lot. So I mean, I've looked over it with Matthias on like what it takes, and it's not actually that much. So it's really mainly a matter of finding the time to work on it. But I think, well, we're more focused right now on fixing bugs and then eventually also, of course, moving our own downstream product onto Pulp 3 and Katello 4.1. And that we have planned squishily for the, I think, end of the year. And once we have it in there, of course, we will only do that if we are 100% confident that it will work for all our customers. So once that's done, it means a lot of things are done, and it also means we have the focus will move towards new features and including Pulp CLI. And maybe we can get Pulp CLI done for that first version as well, but I don't know for sure. I can't promise it.
of course. So my question was really not about the date, because I know fixing dates is near to impossible. So just, is it about 50%, 80%, or what do you think the whole support for Debian is done at the moment?
Well, I'm not sure one can say like for Debian support as a whole, because it's just there's different parts to it, right? So, I mean, I guess the long-term goal is always some kind of feature parity with Pulp RPM support in Katello. And there's lots of open things. Like, it would be nice to get the errata pull request just merged, because we've been dragging it around as a pull request for more than 2 years. And actually, there's not that much missing, I think, at this point, once we get this Postgres extension packaged, and then rebase it one more time and update everything one more time and do a final review, and then hopefully get it merged before the master branch moves on and we need to do it all again. And then there's things like the content view filtering, which is a very nice feature, but maybe not critical to compared to every other feature. And I think right now syncs to smart proxy are broken, and then the GUI needs a cleanup and things like, so those are the immediate things we're focusing on.
Yeah, thanks for your answers. I'm looking if there are more questions. I cannot see any more. So I see Dana is already joining for the next session. So perhaps this is also telling us that there is enough. So if you do not have anything you forget to mention, I would say we will see us later in Work Adventure, and I will switch back to the talk view.
Yeah, in that case, I'll just say thanks for the opportunity to talk, and do contact me on all the other channels if you remember questions later on. So, yeah.
Bye. So, how are we in the schedule? So it was planned to have a small break before we start with a Red Hat Product Manager update from Dana. So as I already have seen him in the live panel, so he joined early. It's no problem because he told me in advance that he is traveling, so he was not sure he could make it for a live QA, but this seems fine. And let's see if Lukáš can join for his live QA, because he was expecting an internet service outage. And as he is posting drinking pictures on Twitter, let's see what happens here. But yeah, we talked a bit more with Quirin, so let's simply start 1 or 2 minutes early with Dana's talk. So in 10 seconds, Dana's talk will be live.
Hello, my name is Singleterry, and I am the product manager for Red Hat Satellite. In this session, I will walk you through the roadmap for Satellite for the next couple of years, covering Satellite 6.10 through 7.x. I want to start first with the disclosure that everything that you see here is likely to change, especially as you get further out in the releases. Satellite 6.10, you can say that most everything you see there that I'm going to talk about is near guaranteed to be included in the product, but things are subject to change, so just keep that in mind. Also, I ask you that you do not record this session, you do not blog on this session. When you do that, it sets the false impression that this is what is going to be delivered in the product in those particular releases that I discuss. And we prefer that, as opposed to doing that, you reach out to us within product management, and we can give you an update based on that point in time. So, general message is things do change, and they change very rapidly, especially the further out you get in our delivery backlog. So with that, let's just go ahead and jump in. So I'm very light on slides today, and intentionally so. I really am going to spend most of the time here just talking about this timeline and going into detail in what is in each of these releases. But I am going to skip over Satellite 6.9. That is publicly generally available today. We released that April 21st of this year, right around the summit timeline. You can go take a look at the release notes and get all the details of what's included in that particular release. So the focus of this session will be to talk about Satellite 6.10 and beyond. But before I do that, I want to get into a little history of where we are today, how we got here, and this is based on things that we said back in late 2019. So in late 2019, Satellite 6.8 was intended to be the last in the 6 series. We had a big release coming in 7.0, which was going to be spring of 2021. That has since changed, and you may have already heard of this. I may have already talked about this in a prior session with you folks, but I just want to reiterate that once again. But before I actually start talking about that, let me talk a little bit about our release cadence. So we are still on a 6-month release cadence. That has not changed. So you can expect a release of Satellite basically in the spring timeframe, aligned with our summit conference or summit event, and then in the fall timeframe, aligned with the Ansible Fest event. So, two releases at within a year, every 6 months. That's the general theme there. So in 2019, though, stepping back once again, we said that 6.8 was going to be the last in the series. 7.0 was coming Summit 2021. This was where we were going to introduce Pulp 3. Puppet was going to be removed from the product, and we were going to ensure an easy and seamless upgrade, as customers have come to expect. Well, things have changed a little bit. And so, where we are today is basically based on the fact that to our customers, 7.0 sounded very daunting. Even though we were, articulating very clearly that the upgrades have been smoother for some time in Satellite, that the same was going to occur in 7.0 because that this was the same technology stack. It was still, the Foreman, Pulp 3, Candlepin, Katello. Unlike that move from Satellite 5.0 to 6.0, where we went from Spacewalk to the 4 upstream projects that I just mentioned, and the experience was somewhat underwhelming, quite honestly, and we did not prepare our customers as well as we should have for what's coming. So with the 6 series ending and going to 7.0, the messaging there is, hey, customers, this is the same upstream stack. We are doing our due diligence. It's going to be a smooth migration or upgrade process. The other reason that we were doing this was to spread that effort out over multiple releases. So, while the upstream projects were the same, we had a lot of tech going into 7.0. And one of the big ones was that the tech update from Pulp 2 to Pulp 3. With that tech update, we were removing MongoDB, or are removing MongoDB, and focusing on PostgreSQL solely. So, that was a significant change, and we really wanted to, be able to do things in a more timely manner, as opposed to, cramming all of this into one release and causing pain and discomfort for our customers, as well as for ourselves, quite honestly. This was a lot that we were asking of our engineering teams. But with this, customers have more time to plan. So our customers have indicated they appreciate this longer planning horizon that we are introducing, and it's going to be much less disruptive to them. And so what I'm talking about here is the introduction, as you can see from this slide, with a 6.9 and a 6.10. So as I already mentioned, we are still on the 6-month upgrade cycle. So a lot of things stay the same, even though we push 7.0. So, introduction of 6.9, that GA just past spring. 6.10 is going to GA in the fall, roughly October, November-ish timeframe. And the other thing that's worth mentioning that is very congruent with the direction that our customers are going is our investment in Ansible. Ansible is the language of the data center for us at Red Hat. And so with that, while that's where most of our customers are living these days, as far as automation and lifecycle management and things of that nature, we do plan on fully removing Puppet as an ENC in 7.0. The Puppet server bits will no longer be shipped. And so we've been setting our customers up for success, and with this introduction of 6.9 and 6.10, we're giving them more runway to plan for this move and to plan for migrating to Ansible and/or acquiring Puppet Enterprise or Puppet Community and doing integrations with Satellite with those external bits, which we would not support those external bits, but we do want them to have that ability to do that integration, if you will, if they choose not to move off of Puppet. The other thing, from a simplification perspective in 7.0, and I've already mentioned this, and I'll mention it a few more times, but just to drive home that with Pulp 3, we're removing MongoDB. We're working on, installation simplifications, and operations and provisioning will be much more prescriptive and automated with 7.0. And then also, focused on tighter cloud coupling itself. So with that, let me just get to the details of the slide that you see now. So once again, really skipping over 6.9, but at a high level, this was all around setting insights as a default for better visibility into what's going on with customers' hosts that they are managing with Satellite, and then sharing of that information if the customer so chose to with our as a service solution to provide more of a, I don't want to say a single pane of glass because it's certainly not that, but more of a comprehensive visualization of their hosts under management wherever they may be, whether they're on premise or in the cloud or some combination thereof. And then also simple content access, and what simple content access did for our customers, or does for our customers, is reduce that friction they have with the strict enforcement model that we have in Satellite today. So 6.10 is where I really want to start. That's all I'm going to say about 6.9 today. 6.10, what we're really focused on is a simple or a more simple setup experience. This is where Pulp 3 comes into play, and originally that was 7.0, but we're able to introduce this in 6.10, and then also worth mentioning, to ensure that we hit our mark on what we're introducing with Pulp 3, we've shipped those bits with 6.9 under the cover. And while 6.9 still leverages Pulp 2, we are able to execute on a high-touch beta with a handful of select customers to try out that experience with the migration from Pulp 2 to Pulp 3 within 6.9. that is ongoing today. So far, so good. Good feedback that we're getting from our customers, and we are uncovering some issues that we have to work on. So really happy that we're able to do that. The other thing to mention here is that Satellite 6 throughout the series will continue to run on Rail 7 and Rail 7 only. So no news there. We'll introduce Satellite running on newer versions of Rail in subsequent releases. The other thing, the other takeaway here is that we are providing a longer life cycle of support for Satellite 6.10. So our normal life cycle of a release for support is 18 months. We're extending this to 24 months, and this is going to give customers a longer time to prepare for Puppet removal. But I also must mention that with 6.10, you can argue that Puppet removal begins here because we are not providing a Puppet content type with the introduction of Pulp 3. So there are some aspects of the Puppet removal that begins here, even though Puppet ENC is going to stick around until the end of 6.10 and be removed in 7.0. 7.0, this is Summit of next year. And let me step back. So Satellite 6.10 is fall of this year. Once again, that's targeted around Ansible Fest. We say October here. I can tell you most likely it's going to be November. We're trying to give it a little bit more runway for our quality engineering team and engineering team, but quality engineering team to shift left and get involved in the testing cycle a little bit sooner. So in order to do that, we're having to give them a little bit more runway on both development and testing. So it looks like that's going to be most likely the November timeframe for that release. Jumping forward now, Satellite 7.0, targeted for Summit timeframe, which is spring of 2022. With this one, this is where Puppet is removed. Rail 9.0 is introduced as a client. We will support Rail 9.0 for all those core use cases of Satellite, from provisioning to content management, patching, lifecycle management, and so forth. Everything that Satellite does today. But we will not support Satellite and capsules running on Rail 9 at this particular release. Instead, Satellite will run on Rail 7, and then we're also introducing Satellite and capsules running on Rail 8. Stepping forward, 7.1, this is all, pie in the sky conversations, things that we want to work on. We still have to justify with the executive team. But I think that, to a large degree, we have good justification behind a lot of these items that we list here. From an HADR perspective, we know that this is something that is in high demand from our customers. We have a story around it today for what it's worth, and that story is around virtualization for HA and DR. Works for some customers are looking for more, and I'll talk about what that more may look like here in a moment. Excuse me. Other thing that we're very interested in focusing on is that of fleet management, or items at the edge, hardware at the edge. And Red Hat has an initiative going on today around edge for automotive, and there is a place for Satellite in this picture, and what that place is to be defined. But we know that there's other verticals, such as trains, trains in their depots, and getting updates, there as well. But automotives, obviously, and then there's a number of other verticals as well that make sense. But also focusing on workloads. We work on workloads from release to release in Satellite 6.10. I'll talk about this momentarily. We're introducing some there, introducing some in 7.0, and that journey will continue. From a what host or what client OS Satellite will run on when we get to 7.1. This is where we will drop Rail 7. Satellite will run on Rail 8, possibly Rail 8 only, but we're also considering introducing Rail 9 at this point and having it run on both Rail 8 and Rail 9 for a release or two before we drop Rail 8 and it's just Rail 9 only. So to be determined on what we do there. So with that, the other thing that I'd like to mention is that, we've been linearly, I guess maybe that's the right word, but laser focused on our on-premise use cases going from satellite 6.8 and beyond. And in 6.7, and I actually, you could say since 6.0 and beyond, but in 6.7, we introduced the concept of Cloud Connector. And what this did for us was allow integrations with our hosted tooling or hosted management services. We call it Insights as a Service, for compliance, drift, and so forth. We will continue to build upon that integration in our hybrid cloud use cases in general. So, while we're focused on delivering new functionality for on-premise, we are opening up that funnel, if you will, for delivering more and more functionality for the hybrid cloud use cases. Last thing that I want to mention here before I start getting into a little bit more detail on 6.10 and 7.0 is that, once again, the life cycle or end of life for satellite 6.10 is being extended by 6 months, so from 18 to 24 months or 2 years, and that end of life basically hits around the Ansible Fest or fall of 2023. So something to just keep in mind, and we are working very, very closely with our customer base to ensure that they are prepared for that. So with that said, let me jump into more detail on satellite 6.10. So the focus here, once again, is on Pulp 3 migration, upgrade, automation, and Ansible integration, and satellite simplicity. So from a Pulp 3 migration perspective, this is, removal of MongoDB, focused on performance improvements with content management and so forth. And once again, we have this in a high touch beta right now with our select customers to prove out what we've done and ensure that we're hitting our mark there. With Ansible integration, the idea here is ensuring that we can get as close as humanly possible to parity with Puppet. We're not going to hit this completely. As an example, we don't have an Ansible client agent, like we do or like there is with Puppet. So there are going to be some gaps there, but hopefully we can close as many of those gaps as possible and provide customers with prescriptive guidance on this is how you do things in Ansible compared to what you used to do in Puppet. We're also introducing an Ansible collection content type. I'll talk about that here in a second. But then focused on satellite simplicity from an installer and cloud connected simplification perspective. So getting into some of those specific features, I've talked about Pulp 3 migration, removal of MongoDB. One thing that kind of is worth calling out again here, and we introduced this in satellite 6.8, is what we call N-1 support. So this is where satellite can be on the latest release, in this case, satellite 6.10, and capsules can be on 1 rev back. They could also be on the latest, but they could be on 1 rev back if the customer is not quite prepared to take that longer outage window required to get their fleet of capsules upgraded. And where this really comes into play is for customers that have 5, 10, and beyond capsules, where that outage is certainly more substantial, if you will. But the reason we're calling it out here again in 6.10 is because this is where we introduced Pulp 3, right? So you can imagine satellite with satellite 6.10 with Pulp 3 speaking with capsules on 6.9 with Pulp 2. So something that we just want to make sure our customers are aware of, and that we are doing our due diligence to ensure that these comms are working as planned. I mentioned Ansible collections a second ago. So where this comes into play is we have tooling or a place where customers can go and acquire collections. We have the Foreman modules, for example, that we productized within Satellite and call them the satellite modules, and they are available on Automation Hub as an example. So customers, and there's a lot of other things that are out there as well. Customers can use this Ansible collection content type to sync with Automation Hub and then bring that content down to an on-premise Automation Hub or to an Ansible tower in a connected experience. Is what we're delivering in 6.10. In a future release, and possibly 7.0, we're going to work on extending this to the disconnected experience as well. Foreman webhooks is going to be introduced here as a replacement for Foreman hooks. You're well aware of that, I'm sure, at this point. Just staying on top of new tech and new functionality for customers. Focused on continued ease of use improvements, whether they be user experience related, working on workflows, improving the workflows, things of that nature. And then we're also introducing support for Azure Government Cloud in 6.10. We've had support for AWS GovCloud. I forget which release that was in. I want to say 6.5, but you can look that up as well as me. And then also introducing provisioning of SAP nodes. So, that's one of the first workloads that we've done recently. And then in a future release, we'll also introduce workloads around SQL Server and beyond. Other improvements are around the connected experience, installation experience, as I already mentioned, and then usability improvements, working on remote execution pages, host registration pages, global registration, and then last but not least, that disconnected and air-gapped user or use case, making improvements there for inter-satellite sync, if you will. Then in 7.0, the theme here is once again around seamless upgrades. We kind of have this theme from release to release. Upgrading to Satellite 7 is going to be painless, non-event. Working on performance and availability, running on multiple RHEL versions, so not just RHEL 7, but introducing RHEL 8. And then tighter cloud coupling. Cloud offerings will be more integrated into the on-premise flows with workloads and so forth in 7.0. So just want to reiterate again, the same upstream projects are what's going into 7.0. So 7.0 is going to be upgradable from Satellite 6.10. Once again, running on RHEL 7 and RHEL 8 and support of RHEL 9 clients for all those core use cases. Puppet goes away here. We're focused on a UI refresh with our styling of Patternfly 4. We're not going to get to complete PF4 styling, but we are making incremental steps in that direction, and we'll continue to work on that throughout our 7 series. We're also doing things around self-maintaining satellite, working on rolling logs and so forth. We're introducing OS tree or RPM OS tree content support in 7.0 in anticipation of our Edge work. This is the content type for Edge at Red Hat. And so this is where this is introduced into Pulp 3. We will no longer provide support for content ISOs. They go away in 7.0. We've communicated this very, very heavily to our customer base, and most of our customers have no issue with this. This really is a little bit more applicable to our disconnected customers, public sector customers that were using these content ISOs. But we've found out that very few customers were doing this, and most customers are standing up a satellite in a connected environment, downloading content from the CDN, creating these ISOs, burning them to disk or whatever format or media they choose, and then walking that over into their disconnected environments and distributing them through satellite in that form or fashion. So very painless, really, and it frees up our delivery team or release team from having to generate these content ISOs. Content publication workflow improvement. So this is essentially a rewrite of our content publication workflow based on customer suggestions, advice, and a very in-depth work review cycle with our UXD team and specific customers. We're also introducing support for OVAL and CVE reporting in 7.0. Other areas of improvements include, working on certificates, load balance capsules, manifests, inter-satellite sync, content view, port consistency, upgrades with a single client tool repo, Ansible repeated runs and visualizations, and as well as security enhancements. So whole lot of things that we have on the docket for 7.0. Hopefully it all makes it in there. Time will tell. And for what it's worth, we are in the middle of our, or not in the middle of, at the beginning of our development cycle for 7.0. Satellite 610 is finished with development and now in the quality engineering hardening cycle, if you will. For 7.x, or call it 7.1 and beyond, I'm just going to keep it very high level and wrap this up so we have time for Q&A. But once again, focused on high availability and disaster recovery, most likely, or I should say possibly, looking at an active passive type scenario. That seems to be the one that fits most customer use cases and needs. The other thing, as I mentioned earlier, is focused on other verticals beyond automotive and fleet management or edge management. Looking at additional work with Ansible, we're going to find out very quickly from customers that we haven't talked to that, hey, we used to be able to do X, Y, and Z with Puppet. We can't do that anymore. How do I do that in Ansible? So I'm sure there's things that we're going to have to help customers with further improvements with our Ansible story. With our work with our hosted experience, our insights, things that we're looking at is telemetry sharing, from satellite to insights to get closer to a single pane of glass for visualization of that overall infrastructure, reporting, inventory updates as well. And then simplification as well as improvements around the multi-tenancy support across the portfolio, as well as authorization improvements. And then, of course, continuing down that journey of adding more workloads as they present themselves as customers' requests or as the business drives. So with that, I will stop at this point. I've said a lot and open this up to Q&A. So thank you for your time, and I'll stick around for a while for questions and answers.
So thank you, Dana, for your talk. You should hear me now also in the live panel. And if you are ready, I will bring you live. So
I am ready. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now you are live on the stream. And there was really not many questions. The first one, just to confirm which satellite version is representing which Foreman and Katello version. So if we were correct, 610 is based on 2.5 and Foreman 2.5 and Katello 4.1. Is this correct?
I believe that's correct. I unfortunately don't have that slide in front of me right now, Dirk, but what I can do, and you tell me the best way to do this, I do have a slide that shows how satellite matches up against all the upstream projects. Is that something that I can share with you and Melanie and that you could share with the community?
Yeah, of course. This would be great because it's always great to have this look behind the curtain, see what is Red Hat doing and planning. And it's always hard to keep these numbers in your head because you have a Foreman version, Katello version, satellite version. And so, yeah, if you can send this to me or Melanie, we will get this information up and running so people can order this correctly in your head. And
yeah, absolutely. And like everyone else here on the call, it's something I can't keep in my head either, unfortunately. And I did have that in my slides originally, and I intentionally left that out, and I probably shouldn't have, since this was a community talk. But I will share that with you as soon as we finish up here.
No problem at all. Thanks for doing so, Dana. And I can understand for a Red Hat customer, it should only be important which version this is. For the community, it's always hard to remember, and for sure, future versions will also change here. So another question, I think it's Brian Kearney who is asking, where are you going, Dana? Because I already said you will join us while traveling. And for all that are fearing now about Dana, I saw he was sitting on not on the driver's seat, so he gets traveled. So don't be afraid about him.
Yeah, no, here's the video of me if you're there, BK. So I am on my way to Siesta Key, Florida for the month of July. I'm going to be working there most of the time. I'll probably take a few days off here and there. But the Mrs. Shannon, I'd show you a picture of her, but she wouldn't be too happy with that. She is going to take the month off and have a good time with the kids. So that's where we're headed.
So, and one technical question at least. I can remember from one earlier roadmap, and I already have seen in the community talks about pull-based provisioner. So for job execution, the Katello agent is be gone or will be gone if we are looking at a satellite version, and should be replaced with this pull-based provider for remote execution. Do you have any news, any dates on this?
Yes, so essentially, and BK can keep me honest here via chat if he's on that. So before we changed business units, the satellite team, we were targeting the Rex pull-based agent. I want to say in 6.10, that has now, and I'm not looking at our backlog right now, that has now moved over to 7.0, if I'm not mistaken. The idea is that we are going to have both the new pull agent running side by side with the Katello agent for one release, and I believe that release is 7.0. And after 7.0, the Katello agent will go away. And we wanted to give users basically a 6-month period where they could do that transition, get comfortable with the new pull-based agent. Does that make sense?
Yes, fully. And thanks for this information, because I at least know one person that will make this very happy, because in this environment, they really have the problems that every agent should be pull-based. So if they do not have to drop out from this for some reasons, this would be great for them.
Yeah, and I'll verify those releases and that I just mentioned, Dirk, and I will share that in the email that I send along that one slide with, so you can either update my messaging there or not if my numbers were correct. But I'm pretty sure that happens in 7.0, and then in 7.1 the Katello agent actually goes away.
Yeah, so Brian is already giving this question to the next person. So, but we will have this information later on the community. So thanks for this. And I have not seen any further questions. So let's give again 10 seconds or similar to YouTube, because it's always a bit behind.
Yes, and actually I just got confirmation from Eric Helms that 7.0 is correct on what I just said, and BK corrected me there via chat that I should have pointed everyone towards Mike McCune, who is the director of satellite. So thank you for that correction. And you were just saying, Dirk, I apologize. What was the last thing that you said there?
It's totally great. I said I will put the information, if we do not get it now, to the community. So perfectly fine. And yeah, Eric and everyone else is also keeping up for you. So there are no more questions. It seems like there came nothing up because YouTube is immer some seconds behind. So Dana, thanks again for your talk. Thanks for being here, for answering the questions, and safe travels.
All right, thank you all. It was a pleasure, speaking at the event, and something I always look forward to, and look forward to us all getting together and doing this in person next time around.
Yeah, I hope so. I already said we will have this next year by ethics, so it will be probably in Munich, and in 2 years I really hope we can do this in person in Nuremberg. So I hope latest then we will meet again in person. Thanks, Dana. I will bring you offline and bring Lukas' talk online next, who will talk about the Foreman webhooks. Dana also mentioned that will be part of satellite in the future. So in 10 seconds, Lukas should be live and talk about Foreman webhooks.
One, two, three, testing. I hope I'm audible. Hello, everyone. Happy birthday, Foreman. Welcome to my talk. This is going to be story. My name is Lukáš Zapletal. I work for Red Hat, and this is going to be story about webhooks. It's not going to be technical or management use case story, I guess. It's just going to be a real story with real people. It's going to be fun, I hope. So in summer 2019, my paper got approved for Open Source Automation Days conference. It was held in Munich airport, and I was all set and ready to present about Foreman provisioning, limitations of Foreman discovery plugin, collect some ideas on how to go forward. It was a freezing morning of 14th of October when I was waiting for my connection from Olomouc station. I remember this vividly because I was traveling late and it was cold as hell, and the train was 50 minutes late. This is Olomouc train station, and it's actually a render. It's not how it looks like in real life. This is more of a real situation right there. Anyway, the train eventually came, and I started my journey. I had to change in Přerov, a nearby city, to an international train to Vienna. So I boarded the international, and everything went well so far. I guess we had probably 90 minutes of standard delay. Approximately 11 a.m., I think, we crossed the borders with Austria. I remember that because that was the time when internet started working, actually. Not that this was important to me. I mean, I usually do some leftovers in planes anyway, and I think this time I was digging deep into Anaconda and Dracut and in-RAM disk generator, and hopefully someday I'll be able to, refactor Foreman discovery to be a Dracut image. Back to my travels. Now, since the conference was at Munich airport, I could go to Brno, it's nearby, and fly from there. There's a little problem with that plan. There are exactly 0 connections between Brno and Munich. Actually, there are exactly 0 connections between Brno and any other city in the world. So that didn't work out. And if you're traveling through Czechia and you can avoid Brno, just avoid it. I mean, this is my rule I live by. There was an option to go to Prague, our capital, but you might already figured out my rule. If you're traveling and you can avoid Prague, just avoid it. I mean, it also saves, the environment and travel budget too if you avoid planes. After I switched in Vienna, things got a little bit better. And as I was strolling through the wonderful Austria countryside, I was looking forward to seeing my friends and colleagues. There are many conferences out there that, I really miss, It's been tough times these days, I used to prefer less crowded conferences, to be honest, which Open Source Automation Days really is, and I highly recommend to go there if you can. This is, by the way, this is FOSDEM, completely different kind of conference, to be fair. This is the king of all open source conferences. This is where all we meet, talk, enjoy our time together, and go to pub, have beers. I really hope that, these times will be back soon. Anyway, arrived in Munich. And if you have never been to Munich, you should go to Munich. I don't know if the city pays Red Hat to do new hire orientation there in Europe, but, when I joined Red Hat, we had so much fun and beer and fun. So the city is great, but I had no time for sightseeing this time. I had some stuff to do. The morning of 15th of October, the conference started, and I met many people from our great community for the first time. I do a lot of remote work and quite some time now, and I can tell you that associating nicks and pictures with real faces, real people, and real impressions is very, very important, I met a lot of new friends, and if you ask me, the hotel is good. I mean, I don't want to make any advertisement here, but, I really enjoyed my 2 nights there. And then if you use the following coupon, you're getting 5% off. Now, at a conference, I had a talk about provisioning with Foreman and presented some ideas on how to go forward. By the way, it's 2021, and I still haven't implemented these specific ideas. I did some prototypes, yeah. I very often go to conferences and talk about the bright future, but then, I only get a feedback. That's the gist of it. But I plan to work on this. The conference was great, a lot of interesting talks. Unfortunately, some of them were in German, which takes us to the lobby. It was at one of these tables when we had the initial discussion about weak points of Foreman at the time. Actually, it was around the corner. There was a different table, but I couldn't find good enough picture. And one of the themes was integration with third-party systems. There were several community users and ethics customers and developers around the table. I think we had a major European drugstore chain, a major worldwide car rental company, as well as other Foreman users and engineers from ethics. And the conversation was going. We touched a lot of topics. It was great. And we all agree that integration with third-party systems is important and we should improve. The best way to integrate Foreman with third-party systems was Foreman hooks plugin. It runs executables or executable files dropped into a config/hooks subdirectory. And it is tied to Ruby on Rails callbacks. So, and also as well as our own orchestration callbacks. So this probably works for some easy orchestration, but there are some drawbacks. And this is where it gets a little bit technical, I'm sorry. I won't go into details much, but the users actually need to understand Ruby on Rails callback system. That's the major issue, I think. And then also we agree that the payload is not well defined. It's actually undocumented completely. It's actually tied technically to our API rendering pipeline, kind of a Rubble templating system, and debugging is such a pain, So we were discussing alternatives and trying to figure out something. And I think for each individual problems we identified, we set up some kind of condition for a new solution. Again, I won't go into details, and probably you can't read it, but basically callbacks should be probably we agree that should be one way, asynchronous, and payload should definitely be well defined, customizable by users, and good documentation, debugging, and logging features from the day one. These were like highlights of our discussions, I think. Well, great, good. So we had a plan. Well, now let's talk execution. Well, we had a bit of discussion right there. See, I was thinking, about staying with shell scripts because I like them, and maybe changing the internal code to be better design. Maybe I was thinking messaging, maybe throwing messages in via Redis and subscribing in a shell script, something like that. While Timo, one of the attendees, thought that the de facto standard called webhooks should be used. And this is really what I miss, the immediate feedback, which you can only get from a meeting in person. This is what I really miss during the tough COVID times. Anyway, from all of this, we agreed that we should probably make some kind of API that plugins could leverage, so anyone could write its own plugin. And with that, I took my train back home, and I guess this is the end. Thank you very much. Well, actually, this is beginning. Timo opened a PR, adding a new API for plugin. He called it Subscriber API, or Subscribers API. Not the date, if you can read it. It's actually the last day of the conference, so I haven't asked him, or he might told me already, but my guess is that he did put this together on the way back. It's pretty awesome. And he also created a first plugin actually that day, utilizing this new subscriptions API. He called it Foreman webhooks, So that's super awesome. And didn't stop right there. I mean, Kamil from Iron, a software engineering company which contributes into Foreman very much. Thank you. He took over the Timo's plugin patch in December. And after my slow review, of course, I'm sorry, 2 months later, we finally merged the subscription API into mcorr. It was January, end of January 2020. And I have to say, the idea of utilizing webhooks was growing on me. Let's fast forward to October 2020, when I presented internally this to Red Hat Product Management. And I thought it's a good idea to actually build on this idea on webhooks. We discussed this. We agree that the webhooks plugin is really promising, and resources were allocated. So we moved Timo's prototype into the Foreman GitHub organization, and Red Hat engineers started contributing. Namely Oleg, Adam, Ron, Maria, and me. I really hope I'm not forgetting anyone. We added support for payload templating, taxonomy, that's organization locations, SSL certificates, new user interface in React, API, and Hammer. This is exactly what Red Hat does. It's the catalyst of open source. We contribute usually these enterprise features that for someone could be a lot of work to implement, and maybe someone don't even need it. But big businesses couldn't live without them. And I think this is open source at its best, when big companies and individuals and small companies work together towards a single goal. And I have never left the idea of writing hooks as shell scripts, so I created a small smart proxy plugin that allows just that. This is how existing Foreman hook users can start if they want to migrate. Now, we are not getting rid of Foreman hooks at all. The plugin will continue working, and if anyone will file a bug, we'll do our best to solve this. And by the way, the integration was never meant to be, fully compatible with Foreman hooks. Foreman webhooks is a different design, completely different design that aims to solve some major issues with the previous design. So it's a good start, but the scripts needs to be rewritten. And here we are, On behalf of all the contributors, I'd like to announce Foreman webhooks version 1.1. As you can notice on the left side, the gem was pushed in April 2021, and it was already present in the Foreman 2.4 repositories for quite some time. And the reason why we are announcing it today is we were waiting for a patch to land in Katello plugin, which is now available with the release of Katello 4.0.1. So there's that. Installation is really simple. You just call out installer, just as you like it. Optionally, you can enable the shellhooks plugin. You don't need it, because if you want to use your own webhooks running somewhere else, that's what you can do. And optionally, you can also install Hammer CLI. So this is how webhooks index page looks like. Actually, webhook templates index page. That's the difference. So first of all, you need to have some templates, because payload is anything you want. You actually use Foreman templating engine to create a payload. We ship with examples for every single individual event that's coming from the Foreman core. This one is for remote execution host job, which is triggered when remote execution performs either a job, arbitrary job, or a feature job, which is basically tied to a specific feature or button in the UI. And as you can see, the form of these examples are kind of a artificial comments, because you can write those payloads in, or create those payloads in XML, JSON, YAML, what have you. It doesn't really matter. So these are like pseudo comments. But the goal was to show you what objects and what methods are available for you, to you. So in every case, it's add object, which is the subject of event. Usually, if it's the host or subnet, something that you're deleting or creating. In the case of remote execution, it's an object of class called runHostJob, which has some fields: host name, host ID, host job invocation ID, and task. You have some more details about when the task, when a task started, and what was the result, and things like that. By the way, this is all safe mode, and this is all documented, meaning that if you go to Foreman about template docs, or API docs and template docs, you'll have a page that will show you all the classes you can access, all the methods or helpers you can call, or things like that. So this is really big, and these are all safe mode. So meaning if you're running in safe mode, you can only call these. Webhooks, on the other hand, looks like this. It's pretty similar, let's walk through a creation process of a webhook. So you give it a name, obviously. You give it an event which you want to subscribe to. I'll show you in a minute. There's a drop down actually. URL is the URL you want to call. It's either your own webhook you develop on your own, or you can use optionally shellhook if you want to call a shell script or executable. In case of shellhook, it's basically a smart proxy URL, HTTPS if you want, /shellhook / name of your executable. It needs to be alphanumeric characters only. Then the template, you again select one of the templates and set a HTTP method. So if you click on the subscribe to field, you'll end up with this list. We have remote execution jobs. We have Katello jobs. This instance actually don't have any Katello events because I didn't have Katello installed, but you'll see content view and promotion and publish events. And we have also build mode, entered, exited, content view, a domain created, and host and host group, model, status, subnet, template, and user. So it's a good start. It's not everything. The goal was not to be like Foreman hooks where you can hook pretty much everything, and then users come to us and say like, this is broken, this used to work, subscribe to some weird stuff we didn't even think about. So that's that. You can ask us, of course, and create us a ticket if you're missing an event you want to subscribe. Then credentials, it's obvious, username, password if you want that. Verify SSL is important. Please do verify, and use the certificate authorities field to enter one or more CAs you want to verify against. If you're using shell hooks via proxy, you can tick the proxy authorization, which will actually perform SSL CA validation for the proxy certificate because Foreman already has that in settings. And the last tab is others, I think. This is where you set content type. By default, this is JSON, and you can provide optional HTTP headers. Going forward, we will probably do a better UI, like something with plus and minus, so you can add one or more headers. But for now, it's just a JSON. So you enter a JSON, valid JSON, and you can actually use ERB there. This can be useful if you use shell hooks, and by default, shell hooks are executed in a way that the payload is passed as a standard input to the process, so shell script or whatever, which is okay. That was how actually Foreman hooks works, but it's a little bit more challenging to debug, and maybe you would like to use arguments if you're just passing hostname, for example. And this is where you can use X shell hook, arg 1, 2, and n, where you can actually set, let's say, addhost.id or addhost.name, and you can pass this as an argument. And thank you very much, and this is all. Happy birthday!
Thanks for this great talk. I see everyone is amused. So let's see if we can bring Lukáš live. So Lukáš, you are live. And before we start with some community questions, you delivered early, so anything changed from here since then? Or perhaps he is not live?
Can you hear me?
Ah,
Hey.
yes, yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, great. I'm trying to turn on my camera so you can see me. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you can.
I can see
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, very good question. Yeah, that's right. So I delivered early because I swapped months. I thought like I delivered a month earlier actually. So a lot of things, a lot of things changed. So actually, we have a webhooks 2.0 actually as we speak. So we released 1.1. I was actually announcing 1.0 as 1.1 if you followed carefully. but it's 2.0 right now. So that's actually that dropped in the 2.5 Foreman release already. So several things were fixed already, and we have another bug we will about to fix. So we'll probably drop 2.1 or maybe 3.0. But these are smaller things. So actually, if you go ahead and pull from the webhooks, you can do it. Just do it in 5 with the stable release. You can do it, and you will be probably pulling. I'm sure it's 2.0, I think. And yeah, that's the stable release, and it's been a little bit improved there by some bugs.
And the second question, because already Brian Kearney is asking, and I saw you were preparing early. So how much beer is still in the keg?
Well, yeah. So I had a neighbor who joined me for 2 hours probably, but he left. We're playing a volleyball in 10 minutes. They're starting at 6, so this probably started. So I'll be joining them, and then we'll return and finish it. So I'd say we just have a couple of beers, but I'm Czech, so yeah, it's a lot of beer. To be honest, yeah. Don't ask me anything.
I'm German, so it's the same for me. And I promised I open just for the social event. So cheers.
Cheers.
So except from the pub or drinking question, there was also the question if the same plugin can be used to push events to Foreman.
That's an interesting one. So we do have our API, and we do stand by saying whatever is available in the UI, we do as an API as well. So everything you see in the UI, and you saw a lot of features and a lot of great things today, and these are all available as we speak, as we drink beer. They should be available as an API calls. If not, it's a bug. We'll fix it. So this is our rule. So that's your integration point right there. And webhooks itself can't be used to call Foreman. It is really one way. It's been designed this way because we've been gathering a lot of feedback from our community and our customers that things do break and people do crazy stuff, to be honest, because what they do is in the hooks they call hammer, and they kind of in the middle of transaction they are calling back, and things got really crazy, and it's been tough, tough time to debug this. Sorry, it's my beer, thing. I can turn it off probably, but you can't do that. I can't actually turn it off. It's always on.
It's fine.
So,
Beer has to be kept cool, and so I totally understand. So this sounds like this was the only question. Timo confirmed he has really written this plugin on the train, and Ewout suggested to have also installer flags, so no one has to remember the RPM names he has seen in your talk. So if no more question pops up in the next seconds, I would say, Lukáš, enjoy your volleyball and empty the keg. So thank you. Bye, Lukáš.
Thank you. Cheers, everyone. Thank you.
Cheers. So this really wraps up nicely this event. I will bring Melanie online in some seconds so she can also wrap up the event from her perspective. I'm really glad everything worked more or less like expected, and I'm really relieved, and I'm happy to join Work Adventure in some seconds to talk to everyone. So I hope you enjoyed the sessions part of the day. And I have to thank my colleagues from the event team and Christian, as already said. I have to thank all the speakers. I have to thank Melanie and Bernhard from Uttings with helping me organizing this event. And yeah, let's see you in the social event part and hopefully next year in person. So, Melanie, you are up. And now she freezes.
Hello.
Yep.
Can you can hear me? Can you?
I can hear you, and hopefully the stream too.
Yay! You can see me, so my camera works this time. So I don't want to prevent people any longer from their work adventure, but I would just like to say that I have been, for the last year, I've been attending a number of online events, and I am just so thrilled that today that our numbers were quite high and quite stable. And I just would like to thank you so much, all of you, for your attention. I would just love to thank all of the speakers also, to those who joined us in cars, to those who added a little bit of beer soakage to our afternoon. Thank you so much. With regards to the survey, thank you all for the feedback. There were 4 of us actually looking at that, including a renowned Red Hat data scientist who is a former community manager of this very community, and he is on holiday at the moment. But once he's back, we will correct it and just clarify those points, and I will put a blog out and an update on our community, so you will be able to avoid any confusion. So again, just thank you. And next week we have a community demo, so we're right back to our normal activity, but let's hang out on Work Adventure and have a beer and catch up. So Dirk, thank you so much for your hosting. I think excellent job, and I'm looking forward to meeting you all in person in a bar somewhere in Central Europe.
Yeah, so thank you, Melanie. This really nicely wraps this up. So I will end the stream in one button push in some seconds, and will meet all of you in Work Adventure. So have a nice evening and bye.